Welcome to my first sketchbook tour. I'm Françoise and today I'm going to let you in on how I've painted this handmade sketchbook with watercolors. I find there are very few watercolor sketchbooks with great paper because usually either the pages are super thin or the sheets dry too fast. So that's how I got the idea to make my own DIY sketchbook so I can use my favorite paper. In May last year, I was scheduled to give my first ever in-person workshop about travel sketchbooks for a festival in my town. So I decided it would be cool to make a bigger, more complex one to showcase my work during the festival. And I think an accordion sketchbook like this is just perfect because you can just open it like this and it's easy for anyone to come look at the art. I'm considering a video on how to make your own customized sketchbook, so if that's something that you find interesting, let me know in the comments. For the cover, since it's cardboard, I didn't want to do watercolor there and take advantage to explore another medium instead. This is my first ever acrylic painting, and it's a Catalan flag. It's a Spanish region we traveled to weeks before the festival, and it's what the sketchbook is about. It took me 3 weeks to paint all 22 pages. It was a pretty intense time, and that's pretty much all I did before the festival. The first spread sets the location and date. I like to be super organized and not have random sketches here and there. So this is France and Spain. We left from here and we traveled there. I was doing a lot of doors with flaps at the time, so I have fun including a window with flaps here too. The sketchbook is about the town of Girona in particular, so I included scrapbooking elements to fill out the empty gaps with beautiful text and stamps. This is the map of the town so I could remember how it's structured. And I decided to include my color palette. I wanted to use the same colors throughout the whole sketchbook, and I found the tropical set by Art Philosophy had the right tones for this northern Spanish region. It renders the vibe really well. I also painted from photos rather than on location because I was traveling there with my kids, and even though my paintings look realistic, I didn't try to be perfect and I tried to loosen up with imperfect edges and effects. I wanted to marry realism to looser watercolor effects, and in this painting in particular, I focused on making the background look blurry and foreground much sharper. Along the river in Girona, there are a few colorful buildings like this. It's one of the things the town is known for, so I had to capture that. With the spread, I wanted to focus on another highlights of the trip. It's a red bridge made by the same guy who built the Eiffel Tower in Paris, Gustave Eiffel. There are a bunch of his constructions everywhere, and I was surprised to find one in Spain. This painting might look like a strange sight, and it's actually another cool highlight in the town that we almost missed. There's a saying in Girona to kiss this lioness's butt, and you know you'll be back to town in the future. There was that sign right next to it that said that we cannot kiss it anymore since the pandemic, so I thought it would make it even more interesting to include to my sketchbook. On the statue, I enjoyed rendering the shadows and the highlights. And actually, I love to paint statues. I think that in watercolor, it's a great exercise if you want to master the light and shadow. We got into the old town this way, and the stone walls were a bit challenging because you don't want to overdo it and paint every stone. So it was good practice for me to do this painting. This spread is my favorite one. A way to draw the eyes to a particular place in the painting is to make it very realistic, more than other elements in the piece. And that's what I tried to do here with the basilica, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, and the cathedral. I loved how the purple complements this painting. If it wasn't for the palette, I might not even have thought of a combination like this. I practiced more stone walls here. We were in Girona for only a day, so we mostly walked the streets rather than visiting each monument. This is not the nicest painting in the bunch, but it's a familiar scene from the Game of Thrones TV show. And that's because some of the scenes were shot in Girona, which I had no idea about, considering this town is, an hour and a half away from my house. And the cathedral main steps actually were used as the front of the Great Steps of Baylor in King's Landing, so I took a photo from the show to paint from. I loved the statues in the front of the cathedral, as well as the door, so I decided to include one of them behind the door, and since I didn't know what to add inside, since we didn't go inside, I just made it dark and played with shadows on the statue. It's one of my favorite paintings in the sketchbook. I drew the statue again here, and another one I liked. My focus was to make them realistic but not too perfect, and also use contrasting colors for the background. These colors are not favorites together for me, but again I thought it really matched the vibe in northern Spain and the bright colors you see in the flag and buildings by the river. I think that just with the colors I managed to render the atmosphere, so I'm pretty happy about that. I totally messed up the ground in front of this door, but I used a magic sponge for watercolor. It was my second time doing that, and every time I notice it really saves the painting, even if it damages the paper a little. There were a lot of pigeons in town and old windows, so I mixed and matched some of my photos with a pigeon photo and made this painting. I made these windows with a flag in mind. You can see the colors are similar. I like the lamps the most, so I made sure to make one a bit more visible in the foreground, and if I remember correctly, this is actually a photo that I found on Unsplash, I think. It wasn't one of mine. So you can mix and match photos of yours and photos that you find online too. We ate these for our only lunch in Girona. They're pretty common foods for tourists, potatoes with sauce and tapas. It was one of the few times I've painted food and I really enjoyed it. I also really like how they turned out, and that really shows how you can fill out your sketchbook with simple things and still make it look cool. I wasn't sure what to paint for the last spread, so I went with one of the main streets in Girona called La Rambla de la Libertad. I'm trying my best Spanish here. It was a bit challenging because there was a lot going on, and this was the day right before the festival started, so I was a bit short on time. And for the last page, I printed the best photos we took of my kids when we were there, and I included them in that envelope. I hope you enjoyed this first sketchbook tour. I'm thrilled I got to share it with you. To learn more about watercolor from me, make sure to check out this playlist, and until then, see you in the next video.